imagine a world where millions of men just simply refuse to participate in modern society.
Like total withdrawal.
Right, completely.
Yeah.
No marriage, no corporate ambition, just total withdrawal from the institutions we're all, taught to strive for. They are taking their money, their labor, and they are retreating to build a completely separate, parallel reality.
It sounds like science fiction.
Yeah, or like the premise of some dystopian thriller. But there's this rapidly growing movement treating this not as fiction, but as an absolute necessity. So today, we are putting on our hazmat suits, grabbing our clipboards, and stepping directly inside a text that is actively advocating for exactly that kind of societal withdrawal. Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, and before we go any further, please take a quick second to hit that like button and subscribe. It really helps us keep bringing you these incredibly thorough deep dives, and we appreciate you doing that right off the bat.
Yes, definitely subscribe. We have a profoundly fascinating and honestly incredibly dense topic to unpack with you today.
We really do. So today's mission is to explore a text that is actively making waves, ruffling feathers, and just acting as a lightning rod for a very specific cultural movement.
Mm-hmm.
We are diving into a highly polarizing, provocative 2025 ebook, and it's titled Men's Spaces, The Art of Brotherhood by Conrad Riker. Now, right at the top, if you find yourself intrigued by the premise we are about to discuss, you can actually go buy this ebook right now on Amazon Kindle and Google Play Book.
And he's got a big online presence too.
Oh, huge. You can follow the author at his handle, at Conrad Riker, on Substack.
Right. And this brings us to an incredibly crucial disclaimer that we really must explicitly state to you, the listener, before we go any further today.
Yes, very important.
The material we are diving into is highly, highly politically charged. I mean, this book is a deep, unflinching plunge into men's rights activism, the manosphere, and some starkly anti-feminist rhetoric.
Exactly. And to be absolutely 100% clear here, we are taking no sides today. None.
No sides.
We are not endorsing, we are not validating or advocating for any of Conrad Riker's viewpoints, his political claims, or his overall ideology. We are not here to debate the morality of his arguments at all.
No. Our mission today is strictly objective. We're acting as your impartial guides. We just want to help you understand the specific arguments, the historical framing, and the underlying ideology that the author is, presenting to his target audience of red-pilled men.
Yeah, this is basically an exercise in mapping the territory of a controversial text. We're looking at how it's constructed and understanding why it is resonating so fiercely with its readers.
Right, we are just documenting what is inside the containment zone, essentially.
Exactly. So let's just jump right into the core premise of Men's Spaces. Conrad Riker is essentially declaring war on modernity itself.
He really is.
He argues that modern institutions, so we're talking from corporate HR departments to family courts to college campuses, that they have been entirely captured by feminist and Marxist ideologies.
Right, and the result of that, according to Riker at least, is that modern men have been turned into house cats.
House cats.
Like, we are fed, we are safe, we are comfortable in our climate-controlled apartments, but we are ultimately neutered, stripped of our primal purpose.
Right, and his solution to that, he says the only way forward is for men to aggressively opt out and reclaim physical and intellectual spaces for themselves.
It is a striking thesis, for sure. And he begins by diagnosing what he sees as a fatal cultural disease. He argues that modernity fundamentally coddles weakness and actively punishes strength.
Mm-hmm.
To use his framing, society is traded in spears for participation trophies and tribal councils for sensitivity seminars.
Yeah, he looks at the history of our institutions before this perceived capture, and he sees a world that was built on raw, unapologetic, male physical effort and risk.
Exactly.
Okay, let's unpack this, because he spends a massive portion of the beginning of the book contrasting the modern, neutered man with these historical archetypes of masculinity.
Right. He doesn't look at a guy working a 9 to 5, answering Slack messages in a cubicle and think, ah, yes, the pinnacle of human evolution.
No, definitely not. He looks back at Spartan warriors, like holding the line at Thermopylae. He looks at modern-day Navy SEALs bonding in the freezing surf during Hell Week.
He's utterly obsessed with that.
Yeah, this idea that men are biologically hardwired to bond through the crucible of extreme suffering and shared physical risk.
And what's fascinating here is how Riker completely re-engineers the modern concept of toxic masculinity.
Oh, this part was wild.
Right. Think about how that phrase is typically used today. In mainstream culture, toxic masculinity refers to aggressive, emotionally repressed, or hyper-dominant behaviors that are viewed as harmful. harmful to society and to men themselves.
Like the idea that telling boys don't cry damages them psychologically.
Exactly. But Riker takes that exact definition, flicks it 180 degrees, and argues that what modern society has labeled toxic is actually the essential biological fuel required to build and maintain civilizations.
He literally says in the book that masculinity isn't toxic, it's tonic. Like, it is the medicine.
Yes, the medicine.
He argues that if you dilute it, if you try to make it softer and more palatable for polite society, you do so at your own peril. And he backs this up, well, he attempts to back it up, with a barrage of data points.
Like the Smithson survey.
Yes, the Smithson survey. He cites this claim that 78% of men report forming their deepest, most lifelong bonds after enduring hazing or grueling physical initiations.
Wow.
Yeah, he's saying that a brotherhood built on suffering will always, without fail, outlast a relationship built on just sitting in a circle and talking about your feelings.
And he grounds that statistical claim in a very visceral, personal anecdote. It really sets the psychological tone for the entire book.
The Wyoming story.
Yes, he describes this time when he was 22 years old, fresh out of college, head full of progressive theories, and he decides to join a wilderness survival group. And this group was run by a former Marine who had tragically lost his unit in combat. Riker paints this incredibly cinematic picture of himself freezing in a Wyoming blizzard. He is trying to skin a deer with his bare hands. He's shivering. He's totally miserable.
And this combat veteran is just screaming at him about how soft modern men have become.
Exactly. And Riker says that in that exact moment, with his hands covered in blood, the wind howling and this veteran yelling in his face, he had an epiphany.
Yeah, he realized that men do not bond over hashtags. They do not bond in safe spaces or through HR-mandated vulnerability circles where everyone uses I statements.
Right. They bond through shared, brutal struggle. The blood, the cold, the yelling, that wasn't abuse to Riker. That was the glue. That was the initiation.
Intense.
It is. He uses that Wyoming blizzard as a narrative anchor to tell his reader something very specific, which is, your biology is not a defect.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine you are a young man reading this. You feel frustrated, alienated, like you are constantly biting your tongue at work to avoid offending a colleague. Riker is speaking directly to that feeling.
He's telling them that frustration is their evolutionary biology screaming at them to rise up, to fight.
To bond with a tribe of brothers who would literally bleed for them, instead of just CCing them on an email.
So Riker is essentially looking at modern corporate culture like a zoo enclosure for apex predators.
That's a good way to put it.
If you think about it, a zoo is perfect on paper. Climate controlled, food delivered on schedule, no predators, perfectly safe.
Mm-hmm.
But if you put a lion in there, it paces the cage. It becomes neurotic.
Right.
It is absolutely soul-crushing for a creature designed by millions of years of evolution to hunt and to struggle. But I have to jump in here and push back a little, or at least ask the question for you, the listener.
Go for it.
Does he account for the fact that we no longer actually need to hunt mammoths to survive? I mean, we live in a highly specialized information economy.
Sure.
The skills required to survive a Wyoming blizzard with a knife are fundamentally not the same skills required to manage a global supply chain software update or like to perform laser eye surgery.
That is the pivotal tension of his entire worldview right there. It is a brilliant question. If we connect this to the bigger picture, Riker's counter-argument is that just because the environment changed, just because we invented software in grocery stores, it doesn't mean the organism changed.
Oh, okay.
He believes the male operating system is still running on ancient primal code. Evolution doesn't update its software in a few hundred years.
Right.
And if you force that ancient code to run in a sanitized, conflict-free, modern corporate environment, the system crashes. The men become depressed, isolated, broken, which leads directly into how he views the concept of interpersonal conflict.
Because if peace and comfort are the problem destroying men in the zoo enclosure, Riker argues that the only logical solution is to tear down the fences and introduce conflict.
Yes.
He makes this massive, sweeping argument that male disputes are best resolved through physical or direct confrontation, rather than the mediated passive-aggressive systems we have today.
He looks at modern conflict resolution, going to human resources, sitting down with a mediator, finding a soft consensus, and he views it as a fundamentally feminine framework. He believes this framework has been forcefully imposed upon men against their natural instincts. And he points to sociological data to support the idea that men actually need friction to function optimally.
And he pulls out some highly specific stats for this. He references a UCLA claim that 84% of male disputes actually resolve faster through physicality.
Wow, 84%.
Yeah, like you see two guys at a bar, there's a misunderstanding, a shove, a quick wrestling match, maybe a punch is thrown, and then the tension breaks, the problem is solved, and 10 minutes later they are buying each other a beer.
Right.
He also points to a 2003 Stanford study claiming that startups with co-founders who actively clash and argue over ideas scale their revenue 3 times faster than co-founders who prioritize playing nice and avoiding arguments.
He is framing conflict not as a breakdown of communication, which is how we're all taught to view it. He frames it as the most efficient form of communication for men.
The forge of brotherhood, he calls it.
Exactly. He argues that modern business schools teach collaboration, but historical reality rewards controlled combustion. Weak men fear sparks. Strong men use sparks to weld things together.
He has this amazing historical reference that he uses, the World War I Christmas truce.
Oh, yeah. This is a crazy reinterpretation.
It really is. So you likely know the story, listener. 1914, first winter of the Great War. British and German soldiers dug into these freezing trenches, but on Christmas Eve they start singing carols.
Right, across no man's land.
Yeah, and the next day they climb out, meet in the middle, play football, trade cigarettes. It is usually taught as this beautiful, transcendent moment of universal peace, a glimpse of shared humanity.
But Riker doesn't view it that way at all.
Not even a little bit.
No, he flips the standard interpretation entirely. He views the Christmas truce as the ultimate expression of the male, nothing personal mindset. He is deeply moved, not by the peace, but by the compartmentalization. Because the very next day, those exact same men who had just shared pictures of their families went right back to their trenches, picked up their rifles, and started killing each other again.
Riker reveres that. He reveres the ability of a man to look his opponent in the eye, shake his hand, respect him, and then fight him to the death, because those are the rules of the game.
And this raises an important question about how he attempts to justify this biologically. He leans heavily on endocrinology to make his case that this isn't just cultural conditioning, it's chemical reality.
Right, the testosterone argument.
Yes. He cites a claim from a Harvard endocrinologist that testosterone spikes during competition literally act as a hormonal glue for male groups. The act of competing, even violently, biologically, synchronizes them. And he pairs this with an Oxford study claiming that men who are allowed to settle disputes physically carry 50% less long-term resentment than men forced to talk it out in an office.
Okay, let's unpack this. So, to use an analogy, Riker views male conflict like a controlled burn in a forest.
Okay.
If you look at a controlled burn from the outside, it looks violent, dangerous, totally destructive. The trees are on fire. But the forest rangers know that if you don't have those smaller fires, the deadwood builds up.
Right.
And eventually a lightning strike creates a catastrophic wildfire that destroys everything. Riker is arguing that male physicality and direct confrontation are the controlled burns that clear out the deadwood of passive aggression and office politics.
That is exactly his framework. He uses boxing gyms as an example. You might have a corporate lawyer and a plumber. They step into the ring, they spar, they literally punch each other. And through that violence, they build immense trust.
The calculus in Riker's mind is incredibly simple. Take a hit, earn respect, build trust. But again, think about your own workplace, listener. How does this boxing glove diplomacy actually translate to a modern tech company or a hospital?
It's hard to picture.
Right. If two neurosurgeons are disagreeing over a complex procedure, we don't want them doing a best-of-3 arm wrestling match in the scrub room to decide who is right.
No, definitely not.
We need them to communicate verbally, using data. Riker's romanticizing of physical dominance seems to ignore the reality that modern civilization relies on highly specialized, non-physical cooperation.
Riker's counter to that, based on his text, would be that by completely outlawing the physical hierarchy, we haven't actually eliminated violence, we've just made it covert. We've replaced the honest punch to the face with the dishonest knife in the back. He claims that in tech companies pushing safe space dialogues, covert sabotage actually increases.
Interesting.
He believes that if you strip away a man's ability to assert dominance directly, he doesn't become peaceful, he becomes a passive-aggressive backstabber.
Wow. And if you think he is harsh on corporate HR, wait until we look at his views on modern marriage.
Yes, this is where it escalates.
Because Riker doesn't just stay in theoretical workplace dynamics. He turns his crosshairs directly on the foundational institutions he believes are actively destroying men. And he starts with the legal system, specifically family courts.
He does not mince words here. Riker refers to modern marriage laws and family courts as a gynocracy.
Rule by women.
Literally, yes.
Yes.
He describes the entire apparatus as a racket, referring to it in print as legalized theft.
Legalized theft.
His argument is built on the statistical claim that 85% of all alimony payers are men. He views the entire legal apparatus of marriage not as a romantic union, but as a heavily biased system designed by the state to extract resources from them.
With virtually no protection if the contract is broken, he strips away all the poetry, all the religious tradition, and reduces it to a brutally unfair financial contract where, in his view, the state has a gun to the man's head.
He calls it a female jobs program.
Yes. He cites the Bureau of Labor Statistics, pointing out that married men work 5% longer hours than single men, and he frames this as unpaid labor.
Right.
He argues this labor is entirely dedicated to subsidizing the lifestyle of their wives. Yoga memberships, luxury cars, vacations.
To understand his perspective here, you really have to understand the historical shift in divorce law. For a long time, divorce required fault. Someone had to commit adultery or abuse to break the contract.
Right.
When society shifted to no-fault divorce, the intention was to allow people to escape unhappy marriages freely. But Riker looks at no-fault divorce through a purely cynical, transactional lens. He argues that no-fault divorce turned marriage into the only binding contract in the world where the person who breaks the contract is financially rewarded by the courts.
And he relies on these very specific, emotionally charged anecdotes to drive this home. He tells the story of a Seattle software engineer going through a contentious divorce.
Oh, the Lamborghini story.
Yeah. This engineer realized his life savings from working 80-hour weeks was going to be systematically siphoned off through alimony to pay for his ex-wife's Pilates classes and trips.
Right.
So as an act of pure protest, the engineer took his remaining liquid funds, bought a Lamborghini, took it to the racetrack, and just burned through the tires.
Just destroy the value.
Yep. Riker doesn't view this as a midlife crisis. He holds this up as a heroic act of rebellion. The logic is, why fund a system that fundamentally hates you when you can buy speed, burn the money, and claim your freedom?
It's an absolute rejection of the traditional social expectation that a man's highest purpose is to be a provider. Riker is telling his readers that providing for someone who has weaponized the state against you is pathetic.
So what is his solution to all this?
He advocates heavily for a concept well known in the manosphere called MGTOW, men going their own way. He is explicitly telling his readers to completely boycott the institution of state-sanctioned marriage.
And he doesn't just suggest it casually. He lays out a timeline and an economic strategy, a 1% male tax strike.
Right.
He claims that if just a small, dedicated percentage of high-earning men opt out of the marriage and alimony markets, they can financially collapse the divorce courts by the year 2030.
He isn't necessarily saying men should become celibate monks, though some do. He is saying they should replace state marriage with private arbitration. He wants men to use all-male legal panels and strict common law contracts to govern their relationships, entirely bypassing the family court system.
Think about the logistical reality of what he is proposing here. Riker wants men to draft corporate-style bylaws for their romantic relationships, complete with binding arbitration clauses that exclude state judges.
It is a complete privatization of human intimacy.
I really want you, the listener, to think about the sheer scale of this proposition, a total financial, legal, and social boycott of the institution of marriage. If men en masse actually follow this advice, what does the author think happens to the birth rate or social stability?
He addresses this directly, actually, and his answer is chilling in its pragmatism. He points to Japan. He notes Japan's collapsing birth rate, citing metrics of 0.7 kids per woman in certain areas, and the rise of what the Japanese call herbivore men.
Right, these are young men who have completely opted out of the corporate hustle and the marriage market. They just live in small apartments, play video games, and consume minimal resources.
But Riker doesn't see this as a tragedy. Most economists look at Japan's demographic collapse and panic. Riker looks at it and sees evidence of his thesis working.
Working, wow.
Yes. He argues that when the cost of marriage becomes 30% of a man's gross income for life in the event of a divorce, opting out isn't a failure to launch. It is a highly rational economic decision.
Wow.
He implies that if a society creates a legal framework that actively punishes men for participating, then that society deserves to collapse.
That is a totally scorched earth approach. Just let the whole thing burn down.
Maybe.
And he argues that this institutional bias doesn't just suddenly materialize when a man is 40 and getting divorced. He says the conditioning starts much earlier. the moment a young man steps foot onto a college campus.
Yes, the university system.
He asserts that college campuses are staging witch hunts 2.0.
Riker views the college campus as the incubator for the gynocracy. His laser-focused target here is the Title IX ex-tribunal system.
Right.
For historical context, Title IX is the federal civil rights law passed in the 1970s that prohibits sex-based discrimination in schools receiving federal funding. Over the last decade, it has heavily dictated how universities handle allegations of sexual misconduct.
And Riker absolutely excoriates how these tribunals operate. He points out this glaring legal discrepancy. They use a standard called the preponderance of evidence.
Right.
If you are in a criminal court, the standard is proof beyond a reasonable doubt. The jury has to be essentially 99% certain, but a Title IX tribunal only needs 50.1% certainty, just a hair over a coin flip, to find a male student guilty and expel him.
Riker likens this to convicting someone because a magic 8-ball whispered maybe.
It's wild. And to illustrate the danger of this, he relies heavily on the Duke lacrosse case from 2006. This serves as the ultimate cautionary tale in his framework.
In that case, members of the Duke lacrosse team were accused of a horrific assault. Before any trial, their lives were publicly ruined.
Professors condemned them, the media branded them as monsters.
And then it was definitively proven through DNA and fabricated timelines that the entire accusation was a lie. The prosecutor was even disbarred.
But for Riker, the Duke lacrosse case isn't an anomaly or a glitch. He views it as the core feature of a system designed to destroy men first and ask questions never.
He backs this up with a stat from the Cato Institute, claiming that 82% of modern Title IX investigators are trained in rape culture frameworks.
Meaning they presume guilt.
Exactly. Riker argues this means investigators enter every tribunal with a structural presumption of male guilt. He compares these proceedings to the Salem witch trials, saying at least in Salem you got a Bible and a rope, whereas today you get an anonymous Twitter thread and your LinkedIn profile permanently deleted.
Making you economically unviable. And this is where we see Riker explain the meteoric rise of figures like Andrew Tate. Now, Riker doesn't necessarily frame Tate as a profound moral philosopher. He frames Tate as a biological immune response to a sick environment.
That is a crucial distinction. Riker is arguing that when 19-year-old men feel cornered by a system where a 50.1% threshold can end their future, they are naturally going to gravitate toward the loudest, most aggressive voice telling them to fight back.
Tate is the fever trying to burn off the infection.
When mainstream institutions offer young men nothing but suspicion, they seek out alternative figures offering absolute certainty.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Because Riker describes how these young men are adapting in real time. He talks about these men's underground groups forming on campuses.
Yeah, he describes them as a mix between Freemasons and Navy SEALs.
Operating out of warehouses or off-campus basements. They are allegedly teaching college men due process hacks to survive the dating scene.
We are talking about the complete militarization of dating. Riker describes guys wearing discreet body cams on dates to record enthusiastic consent.
Body cams on dates.
Yes, and strict rules to never text a girl unless it is through an encrypted, auto-deleting app like Signal, so text cannot be taken out of context later.
But the irony here is just staggering. Think about this. Riker spends the entire first half of the book hating bureaucracy. He hates HR, legalistic bias statements, the sanitized corporate zoo.
Right.
Yet his ultimate solution for a 19-year-old guy trying to go on a date requires that young man to act like a paranoid CIA operative.
Let's to build a legal defense file.
Constantly manage encrypted comms and secure verbal contracts for every single social interaction. By trying to escape the bureaucracy, Riker has essentially told these men to create their own dystopian HR department just for hooking up.
It is a profound, tragic paradox.
Yeah.
Fleeing the bureaucracy of the state only to impose a hyper-vigilant bureaucracy on his own most intimate personal life.
The spontaneity of youth is totally gone.
Replaced by cold, legalistic risk management. But from Riker's perspective, since the institutions are already hostile, the only choice is to build these defensive structures.
Right. If the corporate office is a zoo that neuters you, the family court is a slaughterhouse that robs you, and the college campus is a witch trial. Where on earth does Riker expect his readers to actually go?
If society is compromised, where is the destination?
Exactly.
No.
His answer is that men must build their own physical and digital sanctuaries, and he calls this the garage principle.
The garage principle is his theory that male creation is inherently pathological. He doesn't mean it's a disease. He means men have an uncontrollable biological urge to build, tinker, invent, and solve mechanical problems. And crucially, they need a physical space to do this that is completely isolated from societal judgment and female influence. The garage, in Riker's mythology, is the modern equivalent of the primal cave.
The only place left where a man is judged purely on his output. To illustrate this, he shares one of the most memorable and frankly bizarre anecdotes in the book.
The margarita machine.
Yes. He talks about this divorced Texas father who, after being left with very little in a brutal family court battle, retreated into his garage. This guy took a 1996 Craftsman lawnmower engine, welded it to a kitchen blender, and created this gas-powered, deafeningly loud machine just to make margaritas.
Obsessed for margaritas.
He posted a video of it online, and it went massively viral among men.
Most people would look at that and think, oh, that's a funny internet stunt.
Yeah.
But Riker elevates it to primal rebellion. It's a massive middle finger to the system.
It's a man saying, you took my house, my money, my reputation, but you cannot take my fundamental ability to harness combustion, bend steel, and build something loud and dangerous.
And what's really fascinating here is how Riker connects this raw desire to build things with broader psychological health. He points to the Australian men's sheds movement.
Right, these are community workshops. There are over 2,500 of them now.
Older, retired men gather there. But they don't gather to talk about their feelings. They gather to weld, do carpentry, restore old tractors.
And this taps into how men and women socialize differently, right? Women tend to socialize face-to-face, eye contact, talking about emotions.
Men tend to socialize shoulder to shoulder. They look at a shared problem, a broken engine, and they bond over the shared task.
Exactly. Riker cites University of Melbourne data claiming 68% of attendees at these men's sheds report significantly lower rates of depression.
68%.
Yeah. His conclusion is highly critical of modern psychology. He argues men do not need talk therapy. Sitting on a couch is a face-to-face feminine framework. He says men need a grinder, sparks, a physical task, and the silent receptive getting the job done.
But Riker doesn't stop at physical garages. He extends this into the digital realm with cryptocurrency.
Of course he does.
Riker views Satoshi Nakamoto, the anonymous creator of Bitcoin, as the ultimate modern male role model.
Think about why that is, listener. Nakamoto built an empire entirely in code, generated immense wealth, and then completely ghosted the planet.
Never did a press tour, never apologized to HR. He is untouchable.
Riker points out that crypto is beautifully decentralized. A Bitcoin node doesn't care about your feelings, and crucially, it is immune to the family courts.
He cites a survey claiming 65% of red-pilled men trust a crypto wallet to protect their assets more than a state-sanctioned prenup.
Because a judge can literally tear up a prenup if they decide it's unfair, but a judge cannot guess your 24-word private seed phrase.
The code is mathematically tyranny-proof.
I want to compare this to another story he tells, which is just a perfect metaphor for his mindset. He talks about a construction worker sitting on a steel beam during lunch.
Oh, this one is great.
The worker finishes the New York Times crossword puzzle in pen, flawlessly, and then immediately takes out a blowtorch and lights the newspaper on fire.
Just burns it.
When asked why, the worker says their news headlines lie, figured the crossword answers might too.
It is the absolute rejection of the matrix. Riker is arguing that the mainstream media, the fiat financial system, the legal system, they're all corrupted files. You can't debug them.
Yeah. You just have to unplug. You burn the crossword, put your money in Bitcoin, and build a gas-powered blender in your garage.
But I have to push back on this vision. If we take Riker at his word, he is telling millions of capable men to just walk away, to build this parallel economy. But is this actually sustainable?
Or is it just an elaborate exile?
Right. If you retreat to your garage with a blowtorch, you aren't changing the world, you are hiding from it. You are abdicating your responsibility to society.
Well, Riker would argue that building a parallel economy is a siege tactic. He believes it is the only way to eventually starve the mainstream system of its most valuable resource, which is male competence and labor.
If you withdraw the labor, the system collapses.
But this raises a massive question. If a man isolates himself in this parallel universe, how does he pass his values on to the next generation? If you hate the world, how do you raise a son in it?
Which brings us to his concept of fatherhood, or what he starkly terms legacy labor. Riker looks at young boys in the modern education system and diagnoses them with dad deprivation syndrome.
Dad deprivation syndrome.
He sees boys falling behind girls, retreating into video games, experiencing skyrocketing depression, and he blames the feminization of education. and the absence of strong traditional fathers.
He cites data pointing out that 70% of public school teachers are women, and according to Riker, these environments do not understand male energy.
So when a 7-year-old boy wants to wrestle or is fidgety, the system pathologizes him.
Riker argues that instead of recognizing that energy as the drive that built the modern world, the system treats it as a disorder. They pump the boy full of ADHD meds to make him sit perfectly still for 8 hours to learn gender studies.
He paints a terrifying picture of a system chemically medicating the masculinity out of boys. So Riker proposes a strict countermeasure for fathers called the fort rule.
The fort rule?
He says a father must view his home as a fort, enforcing rigid boundaries to protect his son. Physical boundaries, so no vaping, strict diets, mandatory training.
Mental boundaries, meaning reading actual physical books, not scrolling TikTok.
Emotional boundaries, zero tolerance for victimhood or whining. And moral boundaries.
To back this up, he cites a 2023 Stanford study claiming that fathers who engage their sons in ritualized, task-based activities like building a shed together actually boost their sons' IQs by up to 15 points.
A 15-point IQ boost.
Yeah. He contrasts this heavily with gentle parenting fathers, the dads who get down on eye level and negotiate with their toddlers. Riker views gentle parenting as a catastrophic failure of leadership.
He even suggests a grassroots program called Adopt a Boomer, pairing young Gen Z kids with Vietnam veterans and retired mechanics to learn how to change oil, frame a wall, throw a punch.
Bypassing the therapy industry. He believes a skin knuckle teaches more resilience than 100 hours on a therapist's couch.
Fatherhood, in his eyes, is legacy labor. It requires intentional discomfort. A father's job is not to be his son's best friend.
A father is a rigid purveyor of mastery. He illustrates this by quoting his own grandfather, who taught Riker how to weld at age 8.
Gave him a torch and no instructions.
Handed him an acetylene torch, walked away, and told him that third-degree burns build character.
Third-degree burns build character.
Wow. Riker views fatherhood as imprinting masculine wisdom through shared struggle and literal pain. But I want to ask you, the listener, to really reflect on this. Riker believes taking a 13-year-old into the freezing woods with a compass is the ultimate act of love.
In 1850, on the frontier, maybe that was true.
But in a modern, globalized world, does rugged survivalism actually prepare a child for the 21st century economy?
It is a critical flaw in his framework. Knowing how to skin a rabbit doesn't help you navigate a software engineering team or negotiate a contract.
Exactly. He is preparing boys for a frontier that no longer exists, while expressing contempt for the skills required to navigate the actual world. He equates technological sophistication with weakness.
Which perfectly sets up the final pillar of his philosophy.
Yeah.
Because despite all his talk of retreating to the garage, Riker acknowledges that most men still have to interact with the broader economy.
Unless you are totally off the grid, you have to work.
Right. And Riker's view on the corporate battlefield is that men need to return to ruthless, unapologetic meritocracy. The market is a force of nature. It rewards sharks, not safe spaces.
He expresses a profound disgust for empathy-driven leadership. He views consensus building as an estrogen-dominant framework, prioritizing comfort over profit math.
And he uses Elon Musk's hostile takeover of Twitter as the gold standard of modern male leadership.
Oh, this was a massive part of the book. Musk gutted the staff, brought in physical beds, and delivered an ultimatum of code, or GTFO.
Mainstream analysts called it toxic. Riker calls it a masterclass in meritocracy. He argues Twitter was a soft, HR-driven country club. Musk filtered out the weak and retained a brotherhood of engineers willing to suffer for the mission.
He contrasts this with an anecdote about a female Fortune 500 CEO who took over a century-old manufacturing titan and allegedly bankrupted it within 36 months.
Riker claims she replaced quality metrics with inclusivity scores, causing all the top male engineers to quit.
He uses this to argue that economic biology only cares about results. He holds up the PayPal mafia, guys like Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, Reid Hoffman, as the ultimate Spartan phalanx.
Working 80-hour weeks, debating viciously without crying about microaggressions, and building billion-dollar empires.
He leans on macro-level stats for this. 95% of Fortune 500 CEOs are men. 89% are over 6 feet tall, highlighting physical dominance.
Male CEOs are 3 times more likely to execute hostile takeovers.
But here is the critical analytical turn. When sociologists look at 95% male CEOs, they frame it as systemic bias. Riker frames those exact statistics as definitive proof of Darwinian superiority.
Men are biologically built for the 4D chess of corporate warfare, and women are not. according to him.
So what does this all mean? We have to step back and look at the massive, glaring irony sitting at the center of this corporate vision.
It's a huge contradiction.
Riker spends 200 pages telling men the system is a meat grinder. Corporate HR is a zoo designed to neuter them, and they need to escape. But then he turns around and deifies companies that burn people out through 80-hour work weeks.
Celebrating sleeping on the floor and code or GTFO ultimatums.
He is championing the exact same capitalist machine that grinds men down into dust. He isn't dismantling the zoo, he's just advocating for a different flavor of meat grinder.
It is a profound contradiction at the heart of the manosphere. His definition of freedom in the corporate world is submitting to a grueling hierarchy led by tech billionaires.
Substituting the velvet glove tyranny of HR for the iron fist tyranny of hustle culture, and branding that subjugation as brotherhood.
It is a staggering amount of ideological whiplash to process.
It really is. So let's try to bring this all together and summarize the sheer intensity of what we've covered from Conrad Riker's Men's Spaces. This book is a comprehensive, highly aggressive manual for men to completely opt out of modern societal norms.
Reject consensus, embrace physical conflict, and actively build parallel hierarchies based on coding merit and unapologetic masculinity.
It is a stark apocalyptic vision. Riker envisions a world where men withdraw their energy from mainstream institutions and redirect it into their own hyper-competitive enclaves.
Garages or crypto networks.
And once again, as we wrap up, we want to reiterate to you, the listener, our goal today was purely to map the territory of this text. We are not endorsing Conrad Riker's aggressive worldview, his claims, or his strategies.
Our purpose is to help you understand the psychology fueling this cultural movement. Because whether you agree with it or find it abhorrent, it is shaping conversations online and bleeding into the real world.
Which brings us to our final provocative thought. I want to leave you with a brand new question to mull over. Riker predicts that if men completely withdraw their labor and resources from societal institutions, the whole system will inevitably collapse.
But consider this counter possibility. If that movement actually succeeds at scale, does society really collapse?
Or does society simply adapt, reorganize, and evolve to function entirely without them?
If a massive swath of men retreats to their garages and crypto wallets, might the mainstream world just restructure itself, using AI and female leadership to render their entire rebellion completely obsolete?
It's a fascinating question. Does the zoo collapse if the apex predator refuses to leave its cave? Or do they just open a new exhibit and move on without him? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Please take a second right now to like and subscribe to the show so you never miss a deep dive.
And remember, if you want to read the source material for yourself, the ebook Men's Spaces, The Art of Brotherhood is available right now on Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books.
And you can follow the author at Conrad Riker over on Substack. We will see you next time. Goodbye.